Good evening, everyone. We're continuing with 4 minutes of Mishlei. We're up to Perek, the fifth chapter of Mishlei. There's an interesting theme that you find contrasted in the Psukim, Psukim Yud Dalid and Psukim Yud Dalid and Yud Zayin. So Pasuk Yud Dalid and Tesvav are as follows. It says, Kimad ha'isi b'chol ra b'soch kahal ve'eda. Soon I was in all types of trouble amongst the kahal, the assembly, and the eda. And then it says, Shesei mayim b'morecha, drink water from your own borecha, from your own water source. V'noz lemitoch be'erecha, and then running water will flow from your own well. And then eventually, yefutzu me'anosecha, chutza, your springs will gush forth in many streams in the public squares. And Rashi interprets this as a parable, or a mashal, as we mentioned. Mishlei is full of these types of analogies, and he talks about this as the student of Torah, that you start off filling your own, drinking your own water from your own water sources, and then eventually, he says, Tchila k'mayim mechunasim, and then ulvasof noviim heim v'holchim. You start off with your own gathered waters, whatever you have, and then you give to others, and yefutzu me'anosecha chutza sof shetikna talmidim. Eventually, you will acquire disciples. V'torah horos berabim v'yetzu lecha sham, and then you will teach Torah in the public square, etc. So there's a certain progression from thinking only of yourself, or really just utilizing your own knowledge, and then building that knowledge base, and then eventually not just filling up your own water source, but giving to others. And then the next pasuk, Rashi interprets it a little bit differently, but I just thought it's important that pasuk, Yud Zayin, you l'chol levadecha, ve'ein l'zar mitach. And then you will be sort of in your own category by yourself, and other strangers will not be with you. Rashi has his own interpretation. You're the only one who's going to get the kavod. Fine. I just thought it was interesting to contrast these two themes, that we begin talking about the process of the individual giving back to the community, and then also back to this individual person. So two thoughts. First of all, I remember seeing this was written by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs in one of his covenant and conversations. He said he had the opportunity to ask the Catholic writer Paul Johnson, who wrote the well-known History of the Jews. He said, what was your impression after, not only researching the book, writing the book? It was a really big undertaking. And he said, roughly as follows: there have been, in the course of history, societies that emphasize the individual, like the secular West today. There have been others that placed weight on the collective, communist Russia or China, for example. Judaism was the most successful example he knew of that managed that delicate balance between both, giving equal weight to the individual and collective responsibilities. So I think that there's what to be said, that there is a process here of the individual caring for themselves, but then eventually using their skill sets, their Torah, what they have understood, to then teach the masses. But I wanted to share one last idea, and that's something that I came across this past week in Har Tzvi Al HaTorah. Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank has a beautiful comment in Parshas Re'eh, which I think also addresses this point. So the Medrash he quotes, the Medrash in the Sifrei, it says, beginning of last week's parsha, right? Behold, I place before you blessing and curses. Blessing and curse. So the Medrash says, you might have thought that there's two options, there's two paths. Talmud Lomer, therefore the Torah says, Ubecharta b'chaim. Ubecharta b'chaim actually is the end of Nitzavim, similar psukim. So therefore the Torah has to tell you, choose life. And the question that Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank asks is, what do you mean? Two options? Those are really two legitimate choices. You can either choose a life of curse, or you can choose bracha. That the Torah had to come along and say, Ubecharta b'chaim, choose life. It doesn't really seem to be a legitimate option to choose death. So he says the following: if you look at the way the psukim are written, nosein lifnechem bracha u'klala is lashon rabim. There are many people in the world that will make choices, and they're not necessarily going to make the right choices. Ubecharta b'chaim is not just ubechartem, that you have choices. No, it's lashon yachid. Each individual person has to do what they think is right, what they see as what they know is in their heart, which is true, even if other people are not going to do it, and even if they're going to label you, oh, you're the frum person, or you're this, that. But if you know there's something true, if you know that your heart is telling you that this maybe that people are getting involved with in this business dealing or this issue, this thing, it's not really what I should be doing. It doesn't matter if, that's what everyone does, or what. That's what the Medrash is telling us. That you may think, there's lots of people that have many choices. Some seem to be legitimate choices. But if you know what's true in your heart, and you have a clarity of what's emes and what's not, then don't be concerned about what others are going to say. And perhaps that's a progression. The Pesukim start with the individual, caring about themselves, filling up their water from their own source, then giving over to others, but then it goes back in Pasuk Zayim, Yehu l'chol levadecha. In other words, at some point, yes, you have to give over to the Kehillah. And there is an importance of collective responsibility, but there's also that individual choice that we have to make as individuals.